Welcome, everyone. So happy to see you all. So exciting.
So let's go ahead and do some introductions. I am Ashlea Gray, and I'm in Maryland, but I'm part of the Posse.
I'm Danielle Tarloff. I'm in Summit County, Colorado, and I am also on the GSD portion of the Posse.
My name is Kiya Kelly, and I'm also on the GSD, which stands for Get Stuff Done. I think there's I'm going to say around 10 of us, but I can't count that well. But the GSD is the part of the Adventure Posse who are responsible for getting together activities like our rides and things like this. And it's an awesome group of women that are super smart and bright and enthusiastic. And we're so excited to present this series to everyone. Last year was our inaugural year, and it was kind of a hard year to kick a club off, but we did end up having some group rides. We did a fundraiser at Christmas for some Christmas boxes for the Denver Rescue Mission. And we thought it would be good while the weather's still cool and while we're still kind of social distancing to do something online that folks could join. So this is our first installment. It's called Bike 101. We're going to cover some basic stuff regarding bikes. And then our next one is going to be focused on endurance racing and riding. And that's, it will be the same time of the month next month. And then we have one on bike packing and we have one on biking with kids. So these are going to be run by our GSD women, and we have various levels of experience and we have various disciplines that are represented in our group. And we just want to create a space for women who bike. We're not concerned about what kind of bike you ride or where you want to ride or what you wear or whether you're riding to work or whether you're riding to doing long distance stuff. It's just about getting excited and supporting each other on and off the bike. So our tagline is kind of a spin-off Rodeo Adventure Labs, ride, explore, create. And we say, ride your bike, explore your potential, and create community. So that's kind of a general introduction about us. Sounds like people are still coming in. Am I supposed to let them in?
Nope, I'm on it.
Okay. So that's the intros. I think we've got about half an hour of presentation and then about half an hour of questions and answers. So we should probably get started here.
Awesome. And just a reminder for those people who are just coming in, we are recording. So if you don't want to have your face recorded, go ahead and turn your camera off and stay muted unless you are talking. And if you have questions, we are monitoring the chat. So go ahead and ask away, and then we'll have lots of time for question and answer at the end.
Awesome. So jumping right in is going to be anatomy of the bike. And the reason that this is important is because if something is being funny and you need to talk to a mechanic, it's really helpful to know exactly what you're talking about and how to reference the right parts of the bike and the right names. So that way you can make yourself understood if you need help with something. And also so that way you just also know that there's more pieces and moving parts than are even easily visible. You'll notice this purple section for components at the bottom. There's a lot of stuff down there. And they're not always the obvious pieces for what most people are familiar with. So when we talk about different parts of the frame, we've got our top tube, which is that bar that comes across. I was doing it, realizing they couldn't see. That comes across. So Ashlea's got highlights for me. We've got our head tube. Head tube is a great way of kind of determining size sometimes for bike. Smaller bikes are going to have shorter head tubes. Taller bikes are going to have much longer or taller head tubes. Then our down tube. With modern bikes, that's going to be a place where we see a lot of mounts for water bottles or even frame bags. And then our seat tube is actually the tube that is built into the frame. And then there's going to be another part that's going to be the seat post that's actually not part of the frame itself. That's a piece that can be swapped out. And then the other component in the frame is the fork. This is where we're going to see differentiation between a gravel bike versus a mountain bike. A fork on most mountain bikes is going to have some suspension, some squishiness. And the other thing that'll differentiate a mountain bike frame from a road bike or gravel bike or commuter bike frame is potentially suspension in the rear. There's going to be more names for those suspension components, and things can get more tricky there. If you've got questions on any of that stuff, feel free to chime in. Those are key to know about because there are parts of the bike that can have major wear and tear and are definitely something that's more likely to be serviced by a professional mechanic than something that you might want to take on at home. Next, most important is going to be our parts of the drivetrain. This is where things are most frequently in need of service or attention. Cranks are what your pedals attach to. They're the parts that go spinning around. Chain rings are the gears towards the front. And then the cassette are the gears on the rear. So the cassette is actually made up of cogs. So again, lots of terminology, but it's helpful to know so that you can speak to what actually you might need help with. And then the chain is pretty straightforward. That's going to be what keeps everything connected in that drivetrain. Lots of different parts of the wheels. So the hubs are the part in the middle where we've actually got the bearings and what keeps things spinning. Spokes connect the hubs to the rims. You might have braking surface on your rims, or you might have a component called a rotor. And then tires and or valves. Tubes will go inside your tires, but there's also growing popularity among tubeless, which uses sealant and is a great, easy upgrade for helping run lower tire pressure and getting less flats. And then we've got all the other components that keep everything functioning: shifters, brakes, rotors, handlebars, seat post. That one can be tricky because we've got things now called dropper posts, which are usually an aftermarket upgrade depending on the kind of bike. Stem is going to be key fit piece. You want to highlight that one? That's a tricky little guy. Pedals are pretty obvious. Saddle's obvious. And then hoods are another secret little fit trick. Bottom bracket can be one of those problem things that's not easy to see. Seat post collar is essential for adjustments. And then headset is another one of those zones that's full of bearings to keep things functioning that you might not even know are in there. That's your anatomy of a bike. We're going to have a sheet at the end if you want to print it out and fill it in like a coloring book. We might run a contest on that.
It's going to be fantastic. You really tested me there, Danielle. It's like, oh no, what if I get it wrong?
Okay. And just a side note, if you ladies or have any questions like after, you're always welcome to DM us on Instagram and just ask us questions, or if you need a resource or something, we're happy to be a resource for you as well beyond just tonight.
All right, so I'm going to speak to the Cyclist Tool Kit along with pieces of that toolkit that you're going to want to have on the bike because of things that might happen. And we'll go over some of those things. And then other stuff that you can do to maintain your ride. So if we're looking at things that you definitely want to have with you, this is not a list of, if I was just going to have a couple things, like I was going to go on a shorter ride, I know the route really well, or I'm going to be with some other people, and I'm not carrying a lot of stuff with me, I would make sure that I always have a multi-tool. And I don't know if you can see me. I can't see all you because I'm sharing my screen, but I would always have a multi-tool with me. I would always have some sort of air source. So like an air canister and an air chuck. What do you all call it? Because I said air chuck the other day and you looked at me like I was like wild, totally wild. What do you call it?
CO2 cartridge.
Well, I call this a CO2 cartridge, but then there's a little piece that goes onto the end of your CO2 cartridge. And I call that an air chuck.
Hold it down a little more because we can't, that's the inflator. Yeah, exactly. It looks like a pipe. Yeah, but it's not a pipe.
It's not a pipe. It's not. So you want to use something, you want to have something to get air into your tires. You also want to have extra tubes with you. Even if you run tubeless, like I have my little package all together here, even if you run tubeless, you want to have an extra tube or a patch kit or bacon strips so that you can plug any holes that you get in your tires when you're out on the trail, or on the road, or on a bike path, whatever it is. You want to have wrapped up in this little bundle, whether it's held together with a strap or in a bag. You want to have a master link in there. And a master link is just something that will help you if your chain breaks, so that you're not stranded and having to like hike your bike back to where you started. And I also want to have tire levers with me. Other things that are really handy is to have zip ties. You don't have to carry those with you, but if you're going on a longer trip, you're obviously going to want to add to these on the bike basics. If you're going to go out all day or you're going to go out on a weekend, you're going to want to expand your cyclist tool kit so that you're prepared, because if you're riding prepared, you're going to have more fun when something happens, because things do happen when you're out on the bike. And then in your shop basics, again, can be expanded so much depending on what you're going to do in your own shop. And your shop might be your bedroom, right? It might be the kitchen, wherever your shop is your bike shop. So you're going to want to have, at the least, a full set of Allen wrenches, a screwdriver with multi-bits so that you can, the kind that sometimes they house it in the barrel. So it's really easy to just swap them out. Some chain lube. And there are lots of different types of chain lube, dry chain lube, wet chain lube, and it's all about what conditions you're going to use. But you really don't have to have all of those. Just having a bottle of chain lube is going to be helpful. I like to have bike grease, because bike grease keeps things from rattling apart. Like if your cages start to get loose, or if you're riding clipless and your cleats start to get really loose, putting some bike grease on it is going to help that. Bike grease is also really useful for other things around your house. I pull it out all the time for all sorts of things that are not bike related. So pro tip, rags for the bike grease and the chain lube. A regular size bike pump is like a basic, going to make your life easier. More tire levers, more spare tubes, and household things like dish soap or alcohol or bike cleaner, just to keep your bike in good working order. Okay, so when we're looking at basic maintenance, we already talked a little bit about air pressure and how having tubeless tires can help you run at a lower pressure without flatting out. All of these photos are live linked to videos on how to do these things. So if you're saying, Ashlea, I really wish I had more information about the perfect PSI for my tires, or exactly how do I change that tire because it looks complicated, or they tell me that I'm not supposed to wash my bike a certain way, but I actually need to wash my bike frequently. Exactly what do I do so that I'm not rusting out any chains? You can refer back to these videos. So the bottom video is the 1 hour tune-up. And there might be some of you on this call who are like, you know what, I'd really love to be able to do most of my maintenance on the fly in my own shop. Not because I don't want to go to my local bike shop. I love my local bike shop. But sometimes they're so busy that I'm not going to be able to get in there for weeks, or in pandemic times, months. And I want to be able to manage some of these things, some of these maintenance things, so that I can keep my bike in good working order. And you might need a couple more tools or a little bit more knowledge. And all of that is covered in the GCN video on how to do your bike maintenance. But when it comes down to it, you want to make sure that you're keeping your bike clean, that you are changing out your tubes when they're needed. And it's a good thing to be able to do that. And that you can figure out what kind of ride makes you feel best. So adjusting things on your bike, which Danielle is going to get into, and adjusting your tire pressure. So there are the things, the really in-depth things that you can spend a lot of time on in your shop, and you can go back to and troubleshoot on. But there are going to be times when you're riding that you need to be able to solve a problem right away. And the common things are you dropped a chain off of the ring, which doesn't mean that your chain broke. It just means it kind of fell off. So knowing how to release the pressure and pull back the pressure so that you can just push that chain back up is a good thing to practice. If something comes loose, that's having your multi-tool so that you can tighten it back up, because it's kind of tough to tighten something up if you don't have the right tool. Knowing how to change out a flat tire and having the appropriate tools in your toolkit to change a flat tire or to plug a hole. Snap chain, that can get trickier. That's when you're going to need to have, where'd I put it? You're going to need to have the master link so that you can connect it back together. Now, if you're out on the trail and you don't have something like this, there are other, trail hacks like using a bit of wire, but I'm more likely, frankly, I'm more likely to have a master link with me than a bit of wire. And also recognizing, like, you're riding, you're like, oh my gosh, what is that grinding sound? What is happening to my bike? Why does it feel like it's falling apart? It's squeaking, it's popping. And identifying those things and where it might be coming from, that's why it's important to understand the anatomy of your bike. Because if you can narrow down and diagnose the part of your bike that's making the sound, then you can start using the Google or talking to your local bike shop about exactly what might be happening when you're riding.
Thank you. So if anyone has any questions, there's a lot of information in there that's super useful, but feel free to put it in the chat, or we have a question right now. What's the best way to learn how to change a flat tire? Would you just recommend YouTubing? So I had a friend and I watched her do it for the first time one day on the trail, and that's kind of how I learned. But I am definitely a huge YouTuber for bike stuff. And I think, like, the takeaway that I learned the last 5 years is I'm just as capable and smart to figure out how to fix a lot of things on my bike by watching some good YouTube videos and having the right tools at the house. So I definitely think that's a good place to start. And it seems daunting until you actually do it. And then once you do it once, you're like, oh, that actually wasn't too bad.
We have a few links that we'll share at the end too, with some videos, as well as a little zine that's really sweet.
So I hope that answers your question for now. And like Danielle said, we're going to have some links that we think are worthwhile for you folks. And this presentation, we are going to make it available online so you can use it as a reference.
Yeah, and to the YouTubing things, when I built my first bike, I'm not trained at all in doing anything. But I just looked up troubleshooting on how to build a bike, and it came out all right. I wouldn't build bikes for anybody else, but it came out all right for me. So there's just a wealth of information.
What happened to the presentation? I can't see it.
Since we were having conversation, I thought it would be nice to see everyone.
Face. Okay,
yes.
I like that touch.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna run quickly through how's your butt, and just talking a little bit about comfort and what to wear when you're riding your bike. And my kind of rule of thumb for this is wear what is most comfortable. I don't think that any of us should feel pressured to dress a certain way, and I think everyone on our GSD would probably agree, like, it's all about personal preference. And this is a picture of us on one of our group rides, our GSD crew, and you can't really see, but there's a couple people in cutoff shorts, there's a couple people in like full kits, there's a couple people in baggies and kind of more jerseys. So the one thing I will say is that if you're planning a longer ride, so if you normally go out for half an hour or whatever, and when you're working up to a longer ride, test out your gear before. So wear the shorts you're going to wear, and just avoid wearing new gear for a big ride, because if something's uncomfortable, you're going to be out for longer than normal. And when you're not comfortable on your bike, it can make for a really can actually be a really unpleasant experience. So, you know, shorts or pants, and you have the option of wearing a chamois, which is a pair of shorts or pants that have a pad in them. And not everyone wears those. It's not a necessity. It's kind of like, if it suits you and you try it and it's good, by all means, go for it. Bibs are kind of they look like the wrestling outfits. They come up over your shoulders. Some people have a preference for that. Don't wear underwear underneath your chamois. It's definitely a mistake that can be made sometimes if you're not sure. And it just, if you have too much seams and too much stuff happening down there, you can get unnecessary chafing, and they're designed to wick away moisture and provide some padding. And they're supposed to be tight so you don't get rubbing of the fabric against your skin. What else? Chamois cream, you might hear people say they use it. It's special creams that you can get to put on your shorts or on your like lady regions to help with that chafing. And then tops, just when it's cool, I definitely recommend layering, something wicking. Wool is awesome. And then in warm weather, cover up cover up to keep yourself from getting sunburnt, because that's another thing. You kind of might think you're going to be out for an hour and you end up being out for a couple hours and come home with a sunburn. There's also these strange things called arm warmers and leg warmers that you can get. They're just as they sound, but I didn't know what they were until I kind of started riding a little bit more. Footwear. So you'll hear people talk about clipless pedals, which are actually the kind that you clip into. I don't understand why it has to be that way, but anyway. And it's also personal preference. If you are going to choose clipless pedals, I would strongly suggest, for one, make sure that you can adjust the pedal so that it's very easy to pull your foot out of. And that's a really good way to start, because you want it as easy as possible. And if your pedals are set too tight, you might go to try and get out and you don't make the motion sweet enough with your foot, and it can be a little bit scary. So just know that there's an adjustment on your pedals to make it easier to get out of them when you're kind of learning to use them, and practice in like a soccer field or something. Just go cruise around, and once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy, but it can be daunting. And then if you are going to wear non-clipless shoes, a lot of the time referred to like the special bike shoes for that are flats. Just try and choose something with a stiffer sole, because if your foot is like kind of flexing around on your pedals, you're just spending more energy and it can cause a little bit of discomfort. So the stiffer the sole is better. And that's what makes these bike shoes like 510s and shoes like that. They have a grippier sole to keep your foot engaged with the pedal, but they also have a stiffer sole so that your foot is more flat when it's pedaling, and it's just more comfortable and more efficient. So I think that's the basics for what to wear. Just be comfortable, test stuff out. And what works for someone might not work for somebody else. So like you might get a great recommendation from one of your girlfriends on a chamois that she likes. And I think it comes down a lot to just like trial. I'm going to look at the chat here. Copy of slides. Oh, wool socks. Okay. The wool socks, I love wool, and I almost always wear wool socks in winter, summer, or spring. If I'm going on a shorter ride, like around Golden, I'll wear like polyester or sports kind of socks. I think the wool is really nice for keeping your feet, just wicking the moisture, and they don't smell as much. And I think with the socks, it's just one of those things too, like find what you like. I found a brand that I like, and I just bought like 5 pairs of them and wear them summer and winter. So yeah, just
the other thing that's super important is that most bike shoes are designed to fit very snug. So you don't want a thick sock. Even if it's cold out, you're going to want room for your feet to kind of swell sometimes, which can happen when you're riding. And so thin socks 99% of the time are super important in making sure that you stay comfortable in your bike shoes or your flat shoes.
Yeah, and if you are going out in cold weather and you have those tighter bike shoes and you're wearing your thin wool socks, adding an overshoe, a shoe cover, can make or break your ride. So that's not necessarily something that everybody has to have, but it can make you more comfortable.
Yeah, and if you are riding, like I used to live on Vancouver Island and it rained tons, and I just invested in Gore-Tex shoes for cycling because it was so wet all the time, and it made such a difference. And if you are riding a lot or you're commuting every day and you want to brave the elements, like you can withstand a lot if you have like a good gear setup for that. So we had a question here about if we're going to put the slides up. Yes, we're going to make a copy of this presentation available. Not sure, we'll either link it in our Instagram or we'll send out a link with it, but we will make sure it's available after. Okay, we got a lot of info to cover. So on that note, we will keep going.
Okay, but really though, how is your butt? Bike fit and adjustments that you can make to your bike can be super important for having an enjoyable experience at all. So if you are having pain, if something is pinching, if something is creating major stress on your joints, it's not something that you should suffer through. There is going to be a point where like you might not be completely comfortable all the time, but the goal is to get comfortable. So if you're in pain, things are not right, and it's time to look at your bike setup. The most common area that people are uncomfortable is in their saddle. And the picture here shows your ischial tuberosities, which are more commonly known as your sit bones, and those should be supported by the bike seat. What's interesting about those is that the space in between them, the width of your sit bones, doesn't correlate to any other biomechanical anything at all. You can be a tall, long beanpole and have wide sit bones. You can be a more ample-bodied figure and have narrow sit bones. And so the way to figure out this is usually to go to a bike shop. And I know that can be uncomfortable, but they should be somewhere that you feel comfortable having these conversations. And they will have something either called an assometer or a digital tool or a pad that you sit on. And it's literally either going to have a digital readout of where the pressure is, and that's where they're going to know the distance, or it's literally going to make an impression on the pad and they're going to measure that space. And that's how we make sure that you are on a saddle that supports your skeletal anatomy so that you aren't on soft tissue. There's some videos at the end that are really interesting where we have some frank conversations. It's not an endorsement of that particular brand of Specialized saddles. It's just a funny, frank conversation about how this is a real issue that you shouldn't ignore. You should be comfortable on your saddle. And we don't suppose to pretend that we know which one that is. Everybody's anatomy is different, and it might take, like Kiya was saying, trying a few different things to find the right one. But the other piece here is that the setup of the other components of your bike can contribute to your comfort on your saddle as well. So knowing that your seat is set to the correct height, that you have the right amount of flexion and extension in your knee through hip through ankle. And that's kind of what this little green and blue dots are all the key joints here in your position and your setup on your bike. If you aren't having a good time, if you continue to have pain or discomfort, a professional bike fit is amazing, but a lot of these things are also things that you can fine tune and adjust as you go. So seat height is key, and that's going to be by using that seat post and moving it either up or down to make sure that you are having the right extension from your leg. But you can also move your saddle backwards and forwards on the rails, which are those metal tubes that the saddle sits in the seat post clamp with. So it gets a little techie, but there's usually a bolt in there somewhere. You can loosen that up and move the saddle forward or backward, which can be a great way to assess knee pain. If you're too far forward or too far back, it can be causing some major discomfort. The other thing that plays into that hugely is actually if you're wearing clipless pedals, the positioning of your cleat is going to impact where your knee lines up over things, as well as any pressure points in your feet. So we talk about those major contact points. which are going to be your saddle, your pedals and shoes, and then your handlebar. So the stem is that small piece we pointed out earlier that greatly adjusts the reach. If you get a bike that's a little big or a little small for you, you can make sure that you're not getting back or neck or shoulder pain by adjusting that stem or different size or shape bar. There's so many different kinds now, it's kind of insane. And obviously flat's more common for mountain bikes and drop bars are more common for gravel or road bikes. Get what's comfortable for you. And again, it might take some trial and error and shopping around for different types and shapes. But these are all things that you shouldn't be suffering with. They're easy to swap out with a little bit of know-how, and they can make your ride a much more enjoyable experience. Like your tape or your grips. Anything that's a contact point on the bike can be make or break for having a good time out there.
Well said. Yeah, no amount of padding in your shorts is going to help your saddle if it's not suited to you. Just keep that in mind. All right, so there's a lot on this slide too, and I realize that it might be hard to read, and I'm gonna breeze through this pretty quickly. And I want to preface with, I am not a nutritionist or a dietitian. I'm just a gal that loves to eat and loves to ride bikes. So the main thing you want to avoid when you're riding your bike, or one of them, is the bonk. And when I first started riding, I didn't even know what this word meant, and people were throwing it around, and I was like, what are they talking about? But basically bonking is not having enough calories to fuel your ride, and you end up just feeling very depleted. I notice on rides when I'm not eating enough, I get a really bad attitude and just everything starts to bother me. So it's important when you're riding your bike to stay hydrated and to stay fueled. So definitely for hydration, as we know, it's good to just try and stay hydrated all the time. And I definitely think, especially when you start doing longer rides, it's something you want to start hydrating even the day before sometimes. But stay hydrated with water, and then you can use electrolytes when it's hot, or even in the winter if you're sweating a lot. And this just helps balance out the salts in your body so you can absorb the liquids that you're taking in. I would suggest, and from my experience, it's been really good, if you're heading out for a big ride, to have a hearty meal a few hours before. This is kind of tough, I know, for me sometimes if I'm riding early in the morning, but it is noticeably different when you are well fueled versus just you don't want to be running on an empty gas tank, just like your car. For actually ride snacks, I would suggest just choosing things that are easy to eat. So whether that's getting it out of the package, or whether it's like the texture of it. I mean, you don't want to be trying to open a sleeve of saltines on a hot day and your mouth's dry and you're trying to keep moving. And these can be things that are store-bought or homemade. I'm a huge proponent of homemade things. I just think it's more economical, and I like to know what I'm eating. And it's, for me, homemade just snacks are the best. But keeping in mind, if you don't want to cook your own snacks, or there's all sorts of bars that are aimed at athletes, but then there's things just like graham crackers or granola bars. Like I like to just not overthink it too much and just make sure that you're getting some calories in when you're riding. And then just as with the clothing, find out what works for you. Like I like taking raviolis and pierogies on long rides, and some of the people that I ride with just think that's ridiculous. But I'm not a huge sweets person, so mix it up a little bit. And then another thing I like to keep in mind is if I'm getting hungry, sometimes it's too late. So you kind of want to preempt, because you can sometimes just start burning a lot of calories and you get really into your ride and you don't realize that you should really be eating. So it's good to kind of eat regularly and just try not to get hungry. And I think that's about it for food. I'm going to check the chat to see if there's any questions. And we just had a question that was kind of related to our last topic. And I'll throw it out now. And then if anyone has any questions about snacks, but I think the preliminary thing about snacks and hydration is just make sure you're staying on top of it. So this question is about when you're riding with your period or longer rides, what's the best option, menstruation cups or tampons? So I'll just speak from personal experience. I don't actually use a cup. It's one of those things that I've been meaning to try for a long time. I did a large bike packing trip about 5 years ago, and I got my period the day I started. So it was a 4.5-day camping, self-supported 400-mile trip in California. And I ended up just having to stop at a gas station and buy some tampons and some wipes and take some plastic baggies and just pack out my trash and try and stay feeling clean. On a side note, there's a really interesting book called Roar by Stacy Sims, and she talks a lot about hormones and hormone fluctuations and your hormones during your cycle and how it affects your athletic performance. So that's a side note about periods, but that might come down to personal choice. There was another comment in the chat. Someone says they like the menstruation cups because they're very reliable and leak proof. And I imagine you don't have to change them all the time like you would a tampon. So
I would second that. Thankfully have not had that issue out on a bike packing trip. But yeah, the menstruation cups are awesome because it's also less trash to pack out.
There is that. I'm sure there are lots of people in here
okay,
happy about the menstruation cups. All right.
Yeah.
That was a really good question.
So, moral of the story is there's a million kinds of info that are even still Bike 101, and we didn't want to overwhelm you guys with too much. The main thing is to be prepared for what you decided you're going to do that day. If it's a chill commute, sweet, you probably don't need too much. If it's something more substantial, like a bike packing trip, you're going to need a lot more. You're going to want to bring backups. Don't be afraid to use Google. It's going to give you some good intel because it's Google. But also you've got experts in your corner. Your local bike shop is a phenomenal resource. They should be welcoming and supportive. And if they're not, and you live in a major urban area, find another one. There's no reason to deal with any bro-y bullshit in this day and age. And if they're not willing to educate you, then take your business elsewhere. If you're limited, I'm sorry, that sounds terrible. Send us a DM. We're here for you. We'll be a resource. If we don't know the answer, we'll try to help find it or point you in the direction to it. There are lots of great online resources like we talked about with YouTube that are phenomenal. And we're trying to find more and more that are women oriented. Because Park Tool One comes to mind, but it is primarily run by a bunch of dudes. And that's where we come in with building community. Find other women to ride with, find other people who are more experienced than you that will show you the trails, that will talk you through fixing a flat, that will help you with a drop chain. People who can be a mentor for growing your riding experience are incredible, and they will make it a more enjoyable experience because it's always good to ride with friends safely during COVID times. One of the things we didn't talk about was longer rides and first aid, mountain biking, some of the stuff that can go on when you're further away from, major resources. We're not experts here, but there are lots of great ones. In the Colorado area, there's an organization called Backcountry Lifeline. There's a link to them on our resource slide. And this can be something that you might definitely want to learn more about if you're going out on bigger adventures, but we figured for Bike 101, we would keep it a little bit simpler. If these bigger adventures are enthralling to you and you'd like to learn more about fueling, about gear, about training, about surviving monster efforts, we're going to get into that on our next Posse Presents, which is on April 14th and it's going to be all about endurance rides, events, and races. We're going to have 3 different hosts, I think, for that one. So you'll get a taste of some other members of the Rodeo Adventure Posse, and it's going to be a good time. We'll have a sign up link that'll probably go out a couple weeks before. Catch it on our Instagram, and let's hear about any questions. We've got another slide that's got resources, but you guys can't click on the links until we get this in a shareable format to you.
And remember, everybody, have fun. Bring your PMA, your positive mental attitude, because you can get through most things in life, most uncomfortable, frustrating moments, if you're remembering the fun and remembering why you're out there in the first place.
And if you forgot something or didn't prepare and you don't have a great experience, you're going to remember that, and the next time will be better. Yeah, we'd love to hear questions. There's none in the chat, but
I'm imagining that many of you have your own favorites or your own experiences. This is the community, and this is the sounding board. And even though there are 3 of us here presenting, it doesn't mean that you're not all experts in your own right. So feel free to call that out too.
We'll unmute you. You can talk to us.
So we have a question. Is it Cora?
Yeah, hi. It's my work account, so it came up as that instead of my name.
I know your tricks.
Yeah.
So the question from Cora is, do we have a bike shop or 2 in Denver that we recommend? I go to Golden Bike Shop in Golden. It's more of a mountain bike shop, but I started going there when I moved here 5 years ago, and it's just kind of become my local bike shop. And then honestly, I've learned, I surprise myself because I wouldn't consider myself a mechanically inclined person. And before I moved to Colorado 5 years ago, my dad was like, "You're just as smart as the person on YouTube making the video. Like, just if the tool is the same price as paying someone to repair it, then go buy the tool and watch the YouTube and like give it a go." So I know it's not for everyone, but I just really want to stress the fact that like it's kind of intimidating, but like if you have the curiosity and you want to learn how to do it, it's very manageable. I want to make that like, just like I said, I'm the type of person, like if I take something apart and don't take pictures of it or number the parts with tape, like I can't take the vacuum cleaner bag out and know how to put it back together. Like that's how. So anyway, Golden Bike Shop, home repairs for me. I don't know about who else is in Denver here that might have a suggestion.
I'm not, but I've heard phenomenal things and have definitely dealt with the guys at Slow High. And they've got locations in that, I think it's Highlands neighborhood, as well as over on Colfax. And then MB is a big fan of Yelp. She always talks about how great Yelp is, and I trust her judgment.
They're just real friendly. I like people who are gonna like talk to me about any bike that I bring in and like not make me feel dumb and have a good conversation. So yeah, I would say the guys at Yelp are awesome for that.
And
Super humble and unassuming. Elevation does really good work too. I don't know all the guys at all the shops, but I have some friends who work at the downtown shop, and they're really friendly folks as well. They're close to Union Station, which may or may not be convenient for folks.
Got a couple people saying base camp.
We got a couple votes for base camp. I've never taken my bike to Yop, but I've been on rides with those folks who run the shop, and they seem really rad.
We got a question on
C3 in Golden is another one that came up that was someone liked, and I've heard great things about them as well. And then we'll just start back up here, and there's a couple more questions.
So what do we need to carry on rides? Why tubes if you're running tubeless and a Dina plug? Well, Dina plug.
Great question.
Tricky for one, and you probably haven't practiced using it, and maybe you have, but they don't always hold. They don't always work. Your sealant might be old, you might be dry, And if you have a tube, then you can still throw a tube in that sucker and get home or finish your ride or your race or your event. So tubes are always essential to carry, even if you're running tubeless, for that reason. The plugs don't always stay. Sometimes the sealant or re-inflating will blow the plug back out. So they can be finicky and tricky, and a tube is essential because then you can still get home even if you've got that print pick hole or that sidewall gash. And if we're talking sidewall gash, then boots are something that you can use to kind of patch the tire itself. Food wrapper packages,
From the inside, patch from the inside.
Dollar bill are the great things that work in a pinch.
Yep. And those types of suggestions are covered in one of the videos that's in the resources also.
So just for those folks who aren't maybe familiar with tubes versus tubeless, so the tubeless is set up as kind of what it sounds like. You have your rim, and it's got tape to make sure there's no holes in it, and then the tire is placed on the rim, and then there's this stuff called sealant that's put inside of it, and the sealant is a liquid that like coats the inside of your tire, and then the air is just being held by the tire, so there's no inner tube. And this is the way a lot of bikes are, and especially mountain bikes, because you can run lower tire pressure. And if you run lower tire pressure, you're getting better traction and you're getting a little bit more comfort for the little bumps and stuff. So there's a point where you want to just have your tire pressure as low as kind of possible without squishing it down so much that you're going to get air coming out of it or getting a pinch flat. So so that when you have a tubeless tire, there's these things called Dynaplugs or bacon strips. And the bacon strips are just they literally look like strips of bacon, and they're brown rubber. And there's like this prong, and you put the brown bacon strip in the prong, and then you shove the prong in the tire, and then you pull it out, and the rubber stays in the tire, and it seals it. And then your sealant, the goop in the inside, fills the hole. I don't know if that was too complicated, but when I started mountain biking and moved to Golden, I had no idea what tubeless tires were. So with the Dynaplug and the bacon strips, they do work pretty well, but sometimes, like I had a flat mountain biking and I put 7 plugs in and it wouldn't hold. It was gnarly. So it is good, like Danielle said, to have your tube as backup. Oh, she's holding the bacon strips up. Yeah. So that was a great question. Thank you.
We got a question on group rides. We're waiting on weather confirmation as well as daylight. So keep an eye on the Instagram for that one. Tentatively,
it was maybe supposed to be next week, but I feel like the snowpocalypse could put a damper on that.
And then
so there's another question from Kristen about the asometer and the bike fittings. I know I had a girlfriend that went and did one at Wheat Ridge Cyclery, and she was really pleased with the service and the saddle they recommended.
It looks like you're in Dillon though. So Summit County, a little bit more limited for resources. Wilderness Sports has had fitters on and off. I used to be one, but I don't work there anymore. Front Range has got some of the most professional and experienced bike fitters in the country, in the world. Pros get fit at Retool down in Boulder, which is related to Specialized. So I've got a little bit of Kool-Aid that I've drank there about how that system works. But there's a ton of other shops that offer those services. And again, I would use the same gauge as if you like your bike shop or not. Are they friendly? Do they make you feel comfortable? They should be comfortable using anatomical terms, right? They should know, right? It's real stuff. It's anatomy. It shouldn't be anything that makes anybody squeamish. And it's okay if you're squeamish, but if you want to have a successful fitting experience, you're going to need to be frank with how you have going on and what your discomfort is as well. So it goes a little bit both ways there. But there's a ton of super professional folks down the Front Range. Retool in Boulder, U-Bikes in Boulder is the other one that comes to mind for me. I think Wheat Ridge has got some pretty capable fitters. And I think, was it Pedal over towards Littleton is another one I think I've heard good things about.
So just to be clear though, you can go into like almost any shop and they should have the asometer. And like, I know Yop used to have a saddle library, I think, where you could actually sign out saddles and try them. And Golden Bike Shop had the same. They had a few that you could kind of demo, which is really good. And that's in my experience, that's usually a free service. To take it to the next level, you can actually pay a few $100 for a professional bike fit. And there's a gal pedal fit I've heard good things about, and I know Wheat Ridge was doing them. I don't know if they're doing them in COVID. And then Danielle, I think the shops that you're talking about in Boulder, they probably do them too, right?
Yeah, and my only reason to put it in the context of a fitter is maybe there's nothing wrong with your saddle and your seat height is wrong, and it's therefore distributing your pressure in a way that's not going to make you comfortable in the long term anyway. So we want to make sure that we're troubleshooting your whole body in addition to the set. That was always my philosophy anyway. And yeah, I'm getting into the rabbit hole there of bike fit stuff.
I guess like a bike fit would be great, but they are expensive.
I just mean
the only thing
that expertise and that knowledge is still going to give you a better saddle recommendation, because they're probably going to ask a few more questions than someone who's maybe just a mechanic.
Yeah, and sometimes discomfort, if you've done all those things, you've done the bike fit, you've done the changing of your components, and you're still feeling uncomfortable, then you start looking at your own structure. How am I riding? What's my stance on the bike? Am I activating the right muscles? Am I collapsing my back when I'm riding? Am I arching it too much? Am I strong through my legs? All these things. What's my fitness level? Could that be a contributing factor to my discomfort on the bike? The question about the difference and advantage between having a hand pump or a CO2 inflator. So I'm assuming that you are speaking, Stephanie, to carrying something on the bike versus having like a floor pump in your house. Having a floor pump in your house, unless you live right next door to a place that you can inflate your tires, is one of those things that I feel like you just have to have. But the difference between a hand pump, like a frame pump on your bike, and having a CO2 inflator, these are both important, I feel like, because this is important if you get a total flat. If you get a total flat and you try to pump it up with this, you're going to be there for a long time. Okay, doesn't mean you can't do it. But if you have tubeless, this might not do it, because the air might not go in quickly enough if you've like slipped off the rim a little bit. This, on the other hand, is not great if you just want to adjust your tire pressure a scotch. Sometimes if you're getting really, picky about your pressure and it's not quite right, or you go from road, like I've been doing a lot of multi-surface riding lately. And when I start out, I'm at my house and I'm on pavement. But then I get into gravel or I get into single track and I want to change my tire pressure. But what if I let out too much? Well, I have this. I can just put a little bit back in. But if I was working with this, there's not a whole lot of fine tuning you can do with that. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
There are.
I do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kiya.
So if you're running tubeless and you put a bacon strip or a plug in, in my experience, you pretty much have to have a CO2, because you need that like hard hit of like high pressure air to go into your tire. And when you set up your tubeless tires, like it's the high pressure that seats the tire in the rim. So I think if you're running tubeless and you're going to use plugs, I would say CO2. And if you're going on a long ride, like you're going to be out both, because you want to be able to maybe use a plug and you want to be able to top it up after. So it just depends. Like I went out today and I rode for 45 minutes around Golden on the mountain bike trails. And I was like, I'm just taking a CO2 and plugs, because if I have to hobble down, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But if I'm going for a huge backcountry ride, I want to have plugs, I want to have CO2, and I want to have a pump.
And you want to have multiple
And
cartridges.
a tire. Yeah.
I was going to say the other great reason to have a pump is if you only brought one CO2 and you go flat again, then you aren't stuck entirely.
Excellent point.
And that's another great reason to carry a tube, even if you don't think you're going to need it, because your buddy might, because they might flat twice. And if they flat twice and they're only carrying one tube, guess
Only
who's
if you're-
walking with them?
Only if you're riding with dudes. Just kidding.
We did skip a question though, which
Oh,
was
sorry.
rankings for gravel rides near Golden. That's Kiya's zone. But I am super familiar with the Gravel Bike Adventures ladies. Their website is killer with route suggestions, and they write like these very thorough write-ups, and it's also written to some extent from the perspective of some females, which is nice because they're going to tell you if it's super chunky and you're going to be walking. They're going to tell you if there's sketchy truck drivers or mean dogs, like things that might not necessarily be something that you think about in the quality of the ride is stuff they kind of put in there, which is kind of nice. My other favorite resource is Ride with GPS. I'm a route planning geek in part because my computer is super smart, and if I give it something to do, then it will tell me. But you can put in your location, how long of a ride you want, and then you can use a search term like gravel or dirt, and it'll pull up more than you would expect. So Golden specific, I'm going to take it to Kiya, but general resources, Ride with GPS is huge for me.
There's not a lot of gravel in Golden, unfortunately. So there's a trail that runs off the backside of North Table called the Fairmount Ditch, and it's only like a mile long, but you'll get a bit of gravel there. And then South Table Mountain, if you're willing to go on some buff single track, it's awesome. And that's where we host our women's rides that will hopefully be starting up in the next few weeks. And there's a South Table it's got a stretch of just gravel road kind of that goes one into the other. And then there's a bunch of trails that kind of spur off. There's nothing super technical. And even if there's some spots where it's kind of rocky, you can always get off. But I think it's a nice kind of, it's a nice happy medium if you want to kind of push your limits, but maybe just get a little bit of gravel in. And then you can just loop around the base of North Table on the single track. And it's a little bit rocky, and if it's a more advanced ride, but if you're really wanting to test your skills on some drop bar, if you're new to it. And then other than that, you'll be kind of it's mostly pavement. And then if you want more gravel, you'd have to go to Boulder or down to like Monument or something. I see Kelly shaking her head like Kelly's been out on her drop bar bike riding in Golden.
Well, yeah, I just moved to Golden and I just got a gravel bike at Christmas. And so I've been up to Boulder and rode, but I was like, I don't know really all that much around Golden. So I was hoping you might know something secret that I didn't.
No, there's not too many secrets.
Yeah.
There is nearby-ish, without going all the way to Boulder though, Waterton Canyon, the High Line, which can be crazy busy because it's like just a long unpaved path through kind of South Denver. And then there's some stuff around Chatfield, which you can link up with Waterton. But that's all very Colorado focused, which we may have some folks who are not, because it's Zoom. We can come from anywhere.
So we're kind of at our hour, like we had set an hour for this to do our presentation, our Q&A. I'm willing to stick around for a couple minutes if anyone has any more questions, but I also know that everyone has lives and is busy and might need to have dinner or attend to kids or other things. So on that note, does anyone have any last questions that we can answer for you? Nothing that you're dying to know about? Well, Danielle or Ashlea, do you have any closing comments?
I'm so excited for the spring. I'm ready for some dry trails and to go ride my bike. That's all. And I'm happy that all of you came to talk about bikes with us.
Me too. I hope we'll see you all again soon in Zoom land and in real life.
It was great. Thank you, everybody. Don't
And
talk about your anatomy. Oh, that's Lorena. Yeah.
And if you have any feedback for us, shoot us a DM, and we'll post where we're going to post this presentation. But if there's anything that you thought, or maybe there's another Posse presents that you're just dying to hear about, and also just as our closing comments, like we are going to start our ladies rides or women's rides hopefully soon, and we do them at South Table. And last year it was really awesome. We had a mix of women on flat bar bikes and drop bar bikes and commuter bikes and fat bikes. And it was just a really cool ride for just anyone who wanted to come out and ride. And there's a number of women that became friends and rode beyond our group rides. And we have a Strava Club. If you're into Strava, sometimes it's nice to just see where people are riding and just become friends in that realm. And maybe there's someone in your neighborhood that likes to ride the same things as you. And then of course our Instagram is pretty much where we do all our communicating at this point. Our Facebook is sort of for boomers. Just kidding. But yeah, we hope to see you again soon.
If you've got questions that you
and bikes with baskets
that you were not feeling comfortable asking in public, hit us on the DMs on Instagram or shoot an email to that Rodeo Adventure Posse info@gmail.com. That's a long email address, but it's where you got your Zoom link from, so it's already in your contacts.
Thanks so much. See you soon.
Ladies.
Ride, explore, create.
Yeah.